April 22nd, Lee County LPA meeting. We'd like to call the meeting to order. We'd like to ask Ms. Swindoll if she can advise us as to the sufficiency of the notice.
Good morning, Amanda Swindle at the Lee County Attorney's Office. I have reviewed the affidavit of publication and it is legally sufficient.
Thank you so much. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Whereas this is a public forum, if there's anyone in the public that would like to address something not on the agenda, this would be the appropriate time. If not, there will be time for public comment once the agenda item is in play. We would like to have a review of the minutes, and if anyone on the LPA would like to make a motion to approve or otherwise.
I would move approval.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Don, for the second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item 4A, CPA 2022 Triple Lot 17 and CPA 2022 Triple Lot 18, Calusa 80 track text and map amendments. Add the 192.3 plus or minus acres subject property to Lee County Utilities Future Water and Services Area as depicted on maps 4A and 4B, respectively. Amend the future land use map to redesignate approximately 92.71 plus or minus acres of the subject property from the rural future land use category to the sub-outlying suburban future land use category. Amend Table 1B to accommodate residential development on the subject property, known as 19190 Palm Beach Boulevard, Alva, Florida 33920. Does
The applicant will lead the discussion today.
Neil?
Yeah, it's here.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Neil Montgomery. As the chairman just indicated, we're here for. Okay, Alexis is. Oh, no, here we go. I was trying to use the arrows. Sorry. With me today is our team. The owner's representative, Mr. Wickham, is here. Al Catrone, our engineer that you all know, is here. Ted Trees for transportation is here. Barrett Day School, who did the environmental analysis, is here. David Brown, I don't see at the moment, and Alexis Crespo, our planner. Well, as they indicated, we're here for two things. One is the change in the utility map. That's important because, as Alexis is going to tell you, there's already an approved site plan for this property that has a wastewater treatment plant on the site. This is preferable from an environmental standpoint in proximity to the river to change from a wastewater treatment plant to central water and sewer. And as you know, the county commissioners have been trying to move more and more properties onto central water and sewer because of the BMAP and some of the issues that the county is confronting. So this is consistent with what the county has been doing. The other change is to change a portion of the property from rural to outlying suburban, as already indicated, and Alexis is going to indicate to you that that does not result in an increase in density. I don't know how many of you remember back in '84 when we changed to a map. Anybody? And there was a vested rights process as part of that, and Lehigh challenged the finding that they weren't vested, and ultimately there was a settlement agreement. So the portion of the property that's urban community was determined by a settlement agreement, so that has the urban community density. And that's really not subject to change. So this just would allow the density to be blended. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis.
Good morning, Alexis Crespo with RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture on behalf of the applicant. I'll be doing the bulk of the presentation, and David Brown is hopefully joining us shortly to fill in some of the information on the benefits of the water and sewer expansion to the property, but I'll be covering the planning aspects of the request. As Neil noted, We've got several map changes before you this morning. There's also technically a text amendment just to simply update Table 1B related to the acreages and sub-outlying suburban should the map change be adopted. The map changes would include the subject property in the future water and sewer services maps. As Neil has indicated, the bulk of the property is already an urban community and was intended since the early 90s when that was adopted to have urban levels of development as evidenced by the future land use map as it exists today. So this would allow for Lee County Utilities to serve the property. FGUA is no longer interested in serving the site as they've indicated to us, so this would allow Lee County to fulfill the utility requirements for this urban designated node at Bateman and State Road 80. In terms of our future land use map amendment, this is unique. I don't know that I've ever been before this board asking to change the future land use from outlying suburban, which arguably allows for an additional unit per acre when you go from from rural. You go from 1 unit per acre. Due to a policy in the Lee Plan 5.1.10, you can only cluster densities within urban areas, which would exclude us from being able to cluster our densities across the entirety of the PD. If we don't have this map change, we have to put all of the urban community density on the west side and all of the rural density on the east side. There are some ecological, environmentally sensitive areas on the west side that we would like to cluster kind of in the middle of the site and be able to blend it across those categories. We're actually doing less density on the property than you can do under the rural future land use today. We are seeking no additional density by the future land use change based on the PD amendment that we filed concurrently. So that's fairly unique. It's really just to allow the clustering, and don't usually try to get into too much of the zoning in this form. It's just helpful to kind of frame up the bigger picture of the request. Neil has described the subject property. It's outlined in red on the slide. It's just under 200 acres in size. It's immediately to the east of Bateman Road. The large undeveloped area that you can see to the west of the site is the Hickeys Creek Mitigation Park, which is a recreational park area as well as Gopher Tortoise Mitigation Bank run by the county in concert with FWC. You can see we have substantial frontage along State Road 80, which is a state-maintained arterial roadway. It's also a strategic intermodal system designation by FDOT as a key trucking corridor and really a regional thoroughfare to service southern Florida. So obviously a high number of trip volume along that frontage on a daily basis. The west side of the site is urban community. This was put into place in the early 90s based on a settlement agreement with Lehigh Development Corp. And that future land use allows for up to 6 units per acre standard density. The eastern portion remained in rural future land use. The site has been zoned. The entirety of it has been zoned since 2009 as a recreational vehicle plan development. Stan and his partner Al Hoffman, who you may recall from his WCI days, have owned this property for 15 plus years. They entitled it right around that recession point. It paused, and now that they're seeking this, they looked at what the market's demanding, the costs of utility extensions to serve the project, and reworked the land plan, if you will. Another key aspect of the project's location is it's very proximate to the Caloosahatchee River. So you can see that just to the north on the top end of the slide, and certainly the data and analysis within our application materials as well as your staff's indicate the benefit of reducing any septic systems and even privately maintained sanitary sewer. These are much more likely to pollute the area and the groundwater and ultimately the Caloosahatchee River than Lee County's centralized sewer facilities would. Also, from a water standpoint, having the max density of 664 wells in this property would also be negative to the groundwater resources. This is the existing future land use map settlement area in the brown, the urban community lands that extend to the north of State Road 80, and then there is a transition to the outlying suburban, which is 3 units per acre to our south, and then further off the screen, further south, we know we enter into the central urban areas of Lehigh Acres. You can see, and I appreciated how staff characterized it in their report, that there is an abrupt change. It goes from urban community straight to rural. And so that precipitated the request to go to outlying suburban. This was the next lowest density future land use category we could choose. We have outlying to our south, which is 3 units per acre. Because we need no additional density, we requested outlying, allowing for the 2 units per acre, and really to allow us to cluster. And then you can see there's several nodes along State Road 80 as you move to the east to the county line. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen the edge of that downtown Alva urban community area, which is also in that 6 unit per acre designation. So this is generally a rural area of the county. There are pockets of urban designated areas intended for future development, which could be served by the extension of utilities. This is the existing water service map and the proposed water service map. It encompasses the entirety of River Hall. There are areas, if my pointer works on your screen, it does. This is also Lee County 2020 Preserve, and then this is large lot in the Hickeys Creek development that finally got built out after the recession. And then clearly the mitigation park would not need to connect to utilities, but this is the most proximate urban area that's intended to be served by utilities along that corridor. I will note it is about 3.5 mile extension. Al Quattrone can speak to that. And this would be at the cost to the developer. So this is not the county's funding to serve the site with utilities. The sewer service map is similar, where it encompasses River Hall. We've got the mitigation bank intervening between our property and that development. Again, a developer-funded extension of utilities to serve the site. The vision for the project is a high-end RV resort. That was the vision back in '09, and just that market has evolved significantly over time. So we've had to retool how that zoning was placed, and also rework the master concept plan to achieve more compatibility with the rural area. But this would be similar to the Rivers Bend project on State Road 80 as you enter in Alva, where there would be, we've requested the casitas, where there can be some sleeping quarters on the site, modern amenities to be professionally managed, the zoning, the class of RV and trailers to the higher end of the market, which Stan and Al hope to cater to. So that does remain the vision. Just in having some conversations prior to the hearing, we think this is a benefit from a traffic standpoint. RV resorts produce significant less trips than if this were a conventional single-family community where you've got 10 or so trips entering and exit on a daily basis. RV resorts are much more self-contained and function like a resort hotel from a traffic standpoint to a large extent. This is our current zoning approval, which allowed for a mix of transient and non-transient RV lots. This also had ancillary commercial uses, not open to the public, which we are seeking that through our zoning today, but it did have ancillary food stores, personal services. Some things that staff really struggled with, it was ultimately adopted, of course, but staff struggled with that large central lake area. It's 30-acre lake that was intended to be an amenity, but there was concerns about groundwater, what that would do to the aquifer in the area. And so our revised plan took that into account. And then this old plan had the private on-site wastewater treatment plant or the option to connect to FGUA. We know that FGUA does not intend to service the site at this time. And we do believe it is much more preferable to have centralized Lee County utilities than a private on-site facility with the associated drain fields and things that can contribute to reduced water quality. The proposed plan is shown on this slide. We're requesting 650 lots. Again, We can do 664 under the rural future land use category that exists today, or we can seek that density. We are proposing a commercial neighborhood node along the State Road 80 frontage near the intersection. In order to serve this area, there's fairly limited services, retail options out here. So what's intended to be a limited neighborhood commercial node with just everyday type uses and nothing intensive or that would be an attractant to the area. We have met with Alva Inc., and we certainly have interested members here today. We've probably been 4 or 5 times to their meetings, and over the course of that, at one point we had an emergency or access rather onto Bateman Road. Now it's emergency only for first responders, so that our main access points will be just straight to State Road 80. We have 80-foot buffer along Bateman Road to really provide good screening. In addition to existing native vegetation areas, we would have plantings in these buffer areas in order to screen not only the roadway for the traveling public, but also the bugs and bunnies, if you will, in the mitigation bank. When it comes to the clustering we're seeking, the urban community line is right about here. It's a nice or rectangle shape. And you'll note that our better quality wetlands happen to be on the west side of the site. So we wanted to be able to preserve those and cluster the units more internally and be able to save these higher quality areas. That being said, we still recognize we need to transition to the east, as to our east is rural agricultural land uses. So we do have enhanced 50-foot wide buffers along those perimeter areas. The wastewater treatment plant area would be RV storage in this proposed concept. And then lastly, you'll note that we broke up the lakes, working with your Natural Resources Division and David Brown and Al to get a better plan that resulted in less concerns about the water table. So I've kind of walked through the benefits of clustering, allowing us to save the higher quality vegetation on the west side of the site. This allows us to increase the overall open space in the project up to 76 acres, which is over 50%. Allows for the 80-foot and 50-foot wide perimeter buffers where we abut rural areas as well as conservation. And those buffers are just highlighted in the red. I don't see David Brown here. Do you want to be David, Al? You've got a P after your name, and I don't, so. Fortunately, he wrote out his testimony, so.
Good morning, Al Quattrone with Quattrone and Associates. I will try my best to do what David was going to demonstrate here. David was brought on to help with all the water quality and future monitoring requirements for the project. So he's gone through a lot of more detailed stuff than I typically would do with what we would do. But the bottom line is the property is east of the BMAP requirements, which is a good thing for us. The other thing, too, is what he points out in his report is we've got about 32 acres of lake on this project, which should help for water quality, stormwater, and further reduce any kind of adverse impacts a project like this would have. Alternatively, the property is being used for agriculture right now, cattle grazing, which has been known to have more of an adverse impact on the environment than actually some developments such as something like this. So that will obviously cease once the project takes over. There is some still monitoring that's proposed in the lakes, so it's been simplified a little bit, monitoring, which is over and above which is typically required for a project like this. And also, as mentioned, there was plans of doing a sewage treatment plant. We are now proposing to extend water and sewer. Sewer is approximately 3.5 miles west of this at River Hall. Water is at Werner Drive, coming from Lee County's water treatment plant, about 2 miles to the west. So that'll as well help the project as well from a water quality standpoint. Aside from that, I could try to answer any other questions anybody may have. With that, I'll turn it back over to Alexis.
other environmental benefits I think David was going to speak to. We engaged him kind of midpoint through the process because your staff was being very concerned about groundwater and natural resources with the project. So we engaged in a hydrological study, and we worked out conditions with your natural resources staff for ongoing monitoring of water levels, water quality, et cetera, included in the companion PD zoning. So to wrap us up, I'm going to touch on just LEED plan consistency relating to the water and sewer. The proposal is consistent with the entirety of the LEED plan, specifically standards 4.1 and 4.1.2 related to the extension of water and sewer service to designated urban areas. This is an urban node within the context of the Northeast Lee County. We feel we've balanced protection of the rural surrounding areas, but also are serving a designated community property for the most part through the extension of sewer services. Policy 53.1.9 indicates that when a developer wants to take this on, it is on their dime, and that they will bear the cost of extending the utilities. Lee County Utilities has indicated there is capacity in the servicing wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant to serve the project as well. Through the proposed design, the clustering of density, the reduced density that's not seeking the maximum under the future land use categories, as well as the companion zoning conditions, we will protect groundwater per policy 126.1.4. Relating to the sub-outlying suburban request, this will allow for a transition, a step down from 6 units per acre to 2, and then to 1 to the east of our property. The subject property, in terms of its location, the infrastructure, the roadway abutting it, is consistent with the intent for sub-outlying suburban, and again will allow for a better clustered plan. Objective 2.1 and 2.2 references compact growth patterns. This is precipitated by the urban community node, which is intended for that type of development. We would be consistent with policy 5.1.10, clustering within the PD to preserve the more sensitive areas. Policy 17.3.2, we've met with, when you're in Northeast Lee County, you've got to meet with both Alva as well as North Olga. We've had, I would say, probably close to 10 meetings over the last 2 years with these groups. Since we're the only thing on the agenda, I'll note that there's an anomaly where you have to meet in the boundaries of North Olga, which is east of State Road 31 to the Bob James Preserve. There's no public building in that area. So if this site is in Alva, North Olga, and so we tried to rent the Cracker Shack restaurant. That was not a great location. Owl Creek Boat Works wouldn't let us camp out in their parking lot. So myself and other applicants now are having to post up in a right-of-way nook at North Olga Drive and North River Road just so we can say we had a meeting within the boundaries because of the way the policy is written. So, and it was raining, and Denise was there. People actually did come out in the rain to the meeting on the right-of-way. So that would be a good thing to fix or provide some flexibility in the future. Okay. And probably most critical to the application are the community planning goals, objectives, and policies related to Northeast Lee County and Alva's rural character. The proposed project will support the directive of those policies. It does speak to clustering in order as a mechanism and a tool to preserving the rural agricultural lands and locating development on a property where it's not interfacing directly with lower density rural neighbors. We believe that the proposed amendments before you today will do just that. They will uphold the natural resource protection provisions within both of those community plans and are consistent. So to conclude, we do have your staff recommendation of approval to transmit. We believe these amendments will promote water quality, groundwater quality, surface water quality in a BMAP approximate area. The companion RVPD has been looked closely at by staff and reworked over the past 2 years to ensure rural character and compatibility is addressed through the design. This will not increase allowable density on the site based upon our companion PD and is consistent with both your lead plan as well as Florida statutes. And we are available for questions.
Great.
In reading your information, it appeared as though the project was proposed at 3 different densities, and it was reduced, I think, twice. Is that as a result of your neighborhood meetings or staff or owner?
I would say both. The neighborhood meetings, certainly the number one issue was density. Can you lower the density? Please lower the density. So, and staff, they don't attend those meetings, but we provide meeting summaries, and it was evident that that was, so they sharpened their pencils time and time again to get it to where you can finance this extension, but also make the project work. And we felt, I know 650 was very tight for Stan, but worked well in the fact that we're not using any of the density from the outlying suburban change.
It was nice to see. It's odd to see an owner voluntarily reduce density.
Thank you.
In the information, it said that EMS could be an issue as far as transport. How is that going to be handled? I'm imagining that's going to be handled at the DO level.
Yes, as well as the PD level, and that's been coming up on different zonings out in this northeast area. So we will have a condition in our zoning that we have to pay our mitigation fair share of any deficiencies, and we wouldn't be able to proceed to the DO stage without having that service available.
Just out of curiosity, what's the difference between an RV park and a residential development in irrigation? Is there less irrigation required for an RV park? Do you irrigate the same as you would for a residential lot?
I would say the lots are generally smaller. Your RV standards in your code would dictate that they're smaller lots. There's usually a large paver pad to park the RV on, so I would say there's less sod and landscaping of that nature within.
So your irrigation use would be dramatically less than doing a typical residential.
I think that's a fair assumption, yes. Thank you.
The buffer, the 50-foot wide buffer along the residential, is that the minimum required by the land development code, or are you providing more than what is required by the land development?
That is greater than the minimum required. The RVPD perimeter buffer is 40 feet in width, and so we bumped that to 50, and we've also proposed additional plantings as well. So it's going to be wider and then more thickly vegetated. And it already requires 10 trees per 100 linear feet, so that's an industrial grade buffer by code that we are enhancing.
What's the difference between a mobile home park and an RV park?
They are defined differently by statutes, by your land development code. We cannot have a mobile home or trailer. I think that was also a concern of the community. This would be a trailer park. We cannot have mobile home. It's not a permitted use today or in our proposed change. One is tied down. A mobile home is much more permanent, whereas the RV is a motor vehicle by the state. So,
Anyone else? Got a couple of questions. Okay.
Thank you. Your presentation was good. I appreciate it, Alexis. Could you tell me, when was the zoning initially provided that you said RVPD?
in 2009, the RVPD was approved, yes.
Was it always anticipated to use that same kind of a site plan?
The site plan
The
was,
extension of the utilities too?
the utilities were up in the air. It was either going to be, can we get an agreement with FGUA? And in lieu of that, because of the density and the use, you'd have to have centralized utilities, so with the RV use. So it was either going to be FGUA or a private on-site wastewater treatment plant.
Other question I had was with regard to the, I think it's not in the summary, but in your application, there is a reference that this would somehow address affordable housing needs in the county. Do you recall that?
I don't, and I would disagree with, if I did say that, I would disagree with myself, because the intent here is, the $2 million RV rigs, not affordable housing by any means.
It is mentioned, and I just thought it's inconsistent with your definition here.
I will take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just one thing, and this is more zoning related, so it doesn't really apply, but I just caught it. The future development is encouraged to be mixed use, and I see that you have up to 30,000 square feet, but then in the land development code, it says there's a minimum of 30,000 square feet required. I just think, is that going to be an issue? Is 4.5 acres enough to fit the 30,000? Do you have a minimum requirement of square footage or just that max of 30?
I think I might have to defer to staff if they'll make a requirement for it to be a minimum to comply with the mixed-use definition. You can generally, with a low-intensity commercial site, get about 10,000 square foot per acre. We've chosen a site that's high and dry without needing wetlands or open space, so we can certainly accommodate the 30,000 square foot on that acreage.
Alexis, talk to me about Bateman. You had mentioned that it had been discussed with the community. What access will be available, just to emergency personnel, or is it a side door for internal residents?
It will not be a side door for internal residents. It will be emergency only, stabilized, sodded, so it would not be discernible to anybody traveling on Bateman with the Knox box system for EMS and first responders. Yeah.
I noticed that under the current approval, you have 650 units with 350 being transient. Under the current one, it's 417 with 121 transient. This is 650 with 350. So you've got about a 50% increase in the total number of units, but about a 3x increase in the transient units. Can you speak to that and give us better clarity on what transient means in this context?
Yes, and the word transient, it's defined in the code related to RV PDs, and it's, in my opinion, very misleading. Transient is anything under 6 months of occupancy in an RV park, which is the majority of the residents here. I mean, that's the majority of a lot of single-family communities in Lee County would be considered transient if that were because of our snowbird population. So because it's the 6 month is the bar, and anything to be non-transient, you have to be on site more than 6 months a year. We wanted to have a higher number of transient because we do think most people will come in for season for that, January, February, March, high season for RVing in Florida. And that gave us understanding that definition a little bit better this time around. We realized that number really needed to be increased to speak to how the residency of it. And so really we've clustered those on the west side in the urban community portion of the site. That was something staff asked us to do because they had heartburn about transient being in the eastern, more rural edge of the property. And so we agreed that those would only go on the west side. And I would submit that transient is more of a weekly state is what I would think, and that's not how your code defines it. It's anything less than 6 months.
Is it plausible to think that 300 units will stay there more than 6 months?
It was likely that those would be for sale, and so that I think that takes it kind of off the table if there were a for sale lot and the RV could be there at any time the owner wishes. So I would defer to staff on how exactly that's monitored, considering the nature of RV communities.
Will people be able to buy lots in this project?
The intent is for rental, but we haven't declared that as part of the zoning and are not required to. But I think he intends to maintain the community and manage it and own the land.
I have no further questions for the applicant at this time. Anyone else?
What is your total acreage of open space in the property?
76 acres.
Is that including the lakes?
I apologize. It's 100 acres of open space. It's 76 of preserve. We can only count 25% of our open space can be the lake. We certainly have more lake than 25% of the site. So.
Anyone else?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, does staff like to present?
Good morning, members of the LPA, members of the public. My name is Brian Roberts. I'm with the Planning Section, Lee County Community Development. This is Calusa 80 Text and Map Amendments, CPA 2022-17 and 18. These are privately initiated large-scale text and map amendments. You're going to hear a lot of the same material that the applicant gave. It was pretty complete. There's some things that are different. Staff had a few different findings that were required. I'll go into a little bit more detail on those findings. A lot of it, though, does relate to the things that the applicant has brought up, so give me a little leadway. The requested amendment, again, is to redesignate 92.7 acres to the sub-outlying suburban future land use from the rural future land use, and to add the subject property to Lee County future utilities, water, and sewer maps, and amend Table 1B in the Northeast Lee County planning area to add residential acreage in the sub-outlying suburban future land use. Summary, the applicant's looking to develop 650 transient and non-transient RV sites that will be served by Lee County utilities. And it will establish the sufficient acreage for that development on Table 1B. Location map here, I'll go through a few things with regard to the location. It is on the south side of Palm Beach 8 Boulevard, State Route 80. It is a state-maintained arterial roadway, a main thoroughfare. North of that, parcels are zoned AG2 in the rural future land use. They're on larger single-family lots used as single-family residence for the most part. There's a small restaurant slightly to the east that is zoned CPD, and a large commercial nursery a little further to the east that you can see there. On the south side of the property, there is urban community future land use and sub-outlying suburban future land use, as well as future rural future land use, and with AG2 zoning and single-family residence on varying parcel sizes. A little further to the south is an unrecorded subdivision known as Alva Oaks. You can kind of see it there, but it is unrecorded. It is smaller lots. On the west side is Bateman Road. It's county-maintained local roadway, and Hickey Creek Mitigation Park that's environmentally critical EC zoned in the conservation lands future land use. Further to the east is minor commercial development such as the Village Market and oh, I'm sorry, I went to the east there on you. To the east is minor commercial, is Village Market and Southwest RV services. I'm sorry, that was back to the west. To the east is again AG2 zoned. There's a retention pond that supports State Route 80 and transitions to larger lots further to the east with the Calvary International Church about a third of the mile to the east, to give you an idea of what's around this property. You've seen this map. The cross-hatched area there is the area that's the subject of the future land use change. This gives you an idea of the surrounding future land use. You see the urban community areas that are adjacent to the south and the sub-outlying suburban, mostly rural to the east, and of course a little bit of that area to the northwest that is in the urban community land use area. Our LEED plan analysis, staff looked at several policies in the LEED plan. Policy 1.1.11, which is a sub-outlying suburban future land use. I wanted to point out some differences and some language in that policy that makes it suitable for this area. One, that it's intended for places where it's desired to retain low-density community character. That goes towards meeting the ALVA plan with the community character and low density requirements. Also, you see that there's just that one dwelling unit increase in density. Again, Alexis covered pretty clearly that their plan and the concurrent rezoning doesn't use that additional density, that it's staying under the existing density. Some minor differences in the language concerning public facilities versus not programmed versus not planned or in place. Generally not planned or in place in the sub-outlying suburban. And commercial uses and future land use, rural future land uses are intended for the local community. The applicant isn't proposing commercial uses in the sub-outlying suburban, so that doesn't impact the future land use change. And again, with the frontage on State Route 80, the amount of traffic on State Route 80 and being adjacent to the urban community future land use, staff feels it's appropriate in this area. Objectives 2.1 and 2.2 talk about growth management and growth directed to the urban areas in the county. And again, we're looking at the adjacent urban community areas and providing a suitable transition to the rural areas to the east, as well as the applicants proposing the water and sewer extensions to future urban areas, making this request consistent with those objectives. Policy 17.3.2 required the public information meetings in both Olga and in the Alva communities. Those were conducted or outlined in the staff report, the dates that those two of the meetings were conducted. There were several more. The public had questions about the density, the classes of RVs, traffic generation, utility extensions, development intensity, and maintaining the rural character of the community. Goal 27 and 28 are the community plan goals, and both the Northeast Community Plan and Alva Plan are closely related in that they both want to maintain the rural character of the area and the lifestyle that's in place out there. Policy 27.1.1 and 1.2 are from the Northeast Lee County Community Plan, and they talk about encouraging conservation of open lands by new development and supporting rural character. And again, that falls back to the sub-outlying suburban future land use and those points that I made when we talked about that policy, low density and maintaining community character. It actually says it'll be used for places and areas where high density would be incompatible or where there is a desire to retain a low density community character, is a quote from the Lee Plan. It's also important to note that the sub-outlying suburban prohibits industrial land uses. It's just another thing that helps maintain that character. And again, the transition that you've heard a lot about. We're going to talk a lot about policy 28.2.2. This applies to future land use amendments in the Alva Community Plan. This policy requires future land use amendments that increase allowable density to demonstrate consistency with Goal 28 through a concurrent plan development submittal, plan development rezoning submittal. The applicant has made that plan development rezoning submittal. Staff analyzed the plan development more so than we typically do at this period. We looked at it just in the envelope of Goal 28 for compliance with Goal 28. We're not here to say that the plan development is going to receive a favorable recommendation or not. This is just our analysis with response to Goal 28 and that maintaining that rural character. In that request, the applicant requested 650 RV sites, 350 transient, 300 non-transient, 30,000 square feet of commercial, a maximum of 350 transient RV sites clustered on the urban community future land use, along with the commercial portion of that. When we evaluated that rural character, we looked at objectives 28.1 and policy 28.2.3. In that objective and policy, it gives bullet points and it talks about rural planning practices. And I'm going to run through some of those and what staff looked at and how we came to the conclusions that we came to. Some of those things are managing growth, intensity, and density standards. And again, this falls back to the 664 number that currently exists out there today and the 650 number that they're proposing in the concurrent rezoning. That's keeping intensity and density below what's existing out there. Well, the density standards below what's existing out there. It limits the spread of the commercial uses and maintains all the commercial uses on the urban community. So it's managing that growth and intensity by keeping that on the western portion of the site, not allowing that spread across into the sub-outlying suburban future land use. Another, I know that, and Ms. Russell brought it up, the 30,000 square feet of commercial. The Lee County, or the Lee plan, defines minor commercial as less than 30,000 square feet. And I know we're right there at that threshold, but it's important to note that minor commercial is allowed in non-urban areas in the county. So they're walking that fine line between the MPD and that minor commercial designation. So all those things meet those, they're managing growth, intensity, and density standards through those things. The designation of appropriate uses, and Alexis talked about this, the uses for the most part serve the community. There's nothing that is intense in there, such as fuel pumps or manufacturing or any type of heavy equipment, sales, service, fabrication. Appropriate uses are designated in the plan development. Providing the needed facilities and infrastructure, and again, eliminating the need for the previously permitted wastewater treatment plant. The applicant is proposing through the rezoning to extend water and sewer at their own expense. 3.5 miles, I believe, was how far it's going to be extended, and that's important in a BMAP area. This is an area where septic is being looked at and ways to mitigate that effect, and this helps with that. Conserving natural resources, again, talking back to the multi-lake system that's going to be able to have a cascade in the water table elevation through different control elevations in 4 lakes, which will allow it to mimic the existing water table rather than the previously approved plan that would hold it in a single water table. And the preservation of on-site wetlands and indigenous areas. Adequate open space is another rural planning practice. And the increased buffers it's provided, 100 feet on State Route 80, 80 feet on Bateman, 50 feet on the south and east sides, additional plantings. RV parks are required 40 feet. So you've got that increased buffer space. You've got the total open space, including the lakes, and I think the question was asked on the MCP when it's all calculated out as 100.17 acres, approximately 52% of the site, and that's using partial amount of the lake. There's going to be more because the lake, you only get to use a partial amount of that. In the land development code, 40% of RV sites are required. Open space, 30% of commercial. Preserving historic places and archaeological sites. Portions of this site are in Archaeological Sensitivity Zone 2. At the time of a development order, they'll be required to get a certificate to dig. They did provide a letter from the Florida Division of Natural Resources as part of their submittal. There's no cultural resources recorded in the Florida Master Site file for the subject site. The certificate of dig has conditions. Anything that's uncovered during construction is an immediate stop of work and notification. So that'll preserve those archaeological sites if they're uncovered or historic places. Those are the things that staff looked at in our evaluation and concluded in the staff report that the concurrent rezoning is consistent with policy 28.2.2. Talk a little bit about goal 61 and 61.2, and again, that's the mimicking of the natural functioning of the natural systems. Just to give you an idea, the existing ground levels of the site go from 10 to 19, and that's an NAVD 88, and the groundwater levels on site go from 8.3 feet to 16.3 feet. So it's a significant change. So that the Fort Lake system is a significant benefit. You've seen this map. I don't have the fancy green color on the mitigation park there, but that's the water service area and sewer service area. There's FGUA's current wastewater franchise area, just to give you an idea of how that works into the equation there. Standard 4.1.2 number 4 does allow providers to contract their service area. FGUA is contracting, not contracting, but contracting, making smaller their service area, and they did provide a letter that says they're amenable to that, and that's outlined in the staff report. And Lee County also provided a letter that they have the ability to serve the site. Policy 53.1 and 56.1 talk about providing water and sewer to future urban areas, which this future development looks to provide. And policy 126.1.4 talks about maintaining or improving groundwater levels, and we talked about that with the lakes. And also it's important to remember that the bringing of the sewer and water will reduce the wells, which will also reduce the stress on the shallow aquifer system through additional wells. In conclusion, it's suitable to the change is suitable to retain low density and community character. It's consistent with the Northeast Lee County and Alva community plans. It's consistent with policy 28.2.2. It maintains or improves groundwater levels and preserves on-site wetlands in indigenous areas. Extends water and sewer to lands currently within a future urban area. Promotes the use of sanitary sewer in a BMAP. And amendments to Table 1B to maintain internal consistency. Staff recommends transmittal of the proposed amendment as provided in Attachment 1. We're available for questions.
What was the fall across the site?
It was about 8 feet. And that was contained in their surface water management report as part of the zoning.
From east to west?
I wanted to say it was the southwest to northeast.
Yeah. Alexis mentioned that the reason for the suburban outlying had to be done because of the issue of clustering. And could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah,
it's. And have there been examples of doing that in the past?
I'm not aware of any examples in the past where, well, there may have been clustering that's done in the past with regard to increasing density and that type of thing. But this is a little different in that it's policy 5.1.10, which talks about 2 different future land uses on a property. And if you have those 2 different future land uses, I think there's 4 criteria to spread your density across those. And one of them is that they have to be in the urban future land use category. They can't be non-urban.
Somehow they have to be balanced?
Well, in this case as it exists now, you have an urban and you have a non-urban. You can't spread anything from the urban into the non-urban. So if they were to develop the urban as it sits now, and I don't have the exact unit count in front of me, but it's 6 on 90 acres, say 500 or so units, and they put it on the urban and not spread it, then they're going to develop this site to get the density. And as Alexis showed in the northwest corner is the nice wetlands on the site. So with the ability to spread it by moving it to the sub-outlying suburban, now you're past this being a non-urban. You can spread the density, you can pull it out of that area, spread it across the site, allows you to preserve the well and allows you to break up the lakes.
So that zoning does give you that ability.
It does, and in reality, I don't know if this would be here with that change if that was there or not. I mean, that's a hypothetical, but that's the reason for the change. They wouldn't be able to spread the density.
Thanks, Brian.
Dustin? Don?
With the extension of the water and sewer map, once the developer, builds these utilities, will
The existing would not be forced to connect. And future development would depend on what type of development, where they're at a location to the sanitary sewer in compliance with the Lee Plan and Land Development Code. And there's those specific parameters depending on the location, the distance from it, and the amount of development, the density of the development and the intensity of the development would drive whether or not it had to connect.
So they would have the opportunity, but not the obligation existing.
Depending. Yes.
Okay. Well done, Brian. Thank you for your comments. The next stage of
Yeah. Thank you.
the presentation will be for public comment. And just to be clear, I personally believe this is one of the best parts of this system. It is an opportunity for us to hear how the residents of the area feel about that and their thoughts on that. So we welcome you today, and we're glad that you took the time to be here and to go to these previous meetings. In the sake of efficiency, I'm going to call up 2 people at a time initially, and then 1 other person. Janet will be running a clock. There's 3 minutes that you'll have to express your thoughts, and we ask you to do that. And for the first 2, the first speaker will be Connie Dennis, and then on deck next to them would be Denise Eberly. Denise Eberly, are you here? Yeah. If you'll just stand in the wing, that way we can get everybody's comments in. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Connie Dennis, and I'm president of Alva Inc. And I just want to share what the residents have been expressing over the last couple of years. The members of Alva Inc. have many concerns concerning possible development of Calusa 80 on State Road 80 by the corner of Bateman. A 30,000 square foot commercial area located on Highway 80 is completely against our Lee County approved community plan. And this is, we don't want strip malls, we don't want a start of strip malls. And it seems like this could be the first step. So we're very, very concerned. We want to keep it rural, and people come along, driving along 80, and they love Alva because it is rural. The approved plan puts all new commercial development in the Alva Village located in the central Alva area close to the Alva Bridge. Developers plan on bringing sewer and water to the site. This could bring further development along Highway 80, possibly even the strip malls. The population increase brought by 650 sites could bring a dramatic increase in the heavy traffic currently experienced. A major concern is the impact that this development could have on our environment, and we're very concerned. We're surrounded by 3 preserves with the animals, all the panthers, everything is right there that cross across there. So we're concerned about that. And this plan development doesn't fit the character of our rural environment. So that's the major concerns that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connie. And Denise, as you take the lectern, if Paul Furbeck could come to the on deck circle, please. Thank you, Paul. Denise, the floor is yours.
Okay, Denise Eberly, Alva, also a member of Alva Inc., director. To make this really simple is we have a community plan that was developed by Lee County and approved and adopted. If you have to amend it, then you are not following the community plan. It's that simple. Now, as far as going from urban to sub-outlying suburban, well, then that end up with what happens with that is now you're changing the rural community of Alva. That is a rural property. It is not sub-outlying. So then what happens is, okay, they get approval to make that sub-outlying. Then the next developer comes in, makes that sub-outlying. The next developer comes in, makes that sub-outlying. The next developer comes. Eventually, Alva is no longer rural. It's either urban or outlying suburban or suburban. So, sorry. So then Alva is gone. It's no longer rural. Now, I mean, they pick and choose a couple goals here and a couple policies from those goals. If you look at the Alva Community Plan and the goals, it's quite extensive. One of them I'll just bring up is related to the 30,000 square feet of commercial. To prevent strip development along Palm Beach Boulevard, the majority of acreage available for commercial development will be located within the rural village, particularly the village center. We don't want strip malls. We don't want commercial elsewhere. Again, they get it. Everybody else gets it. This sets a precedent for basically transforming Alva out of a rural community. It then becomes an urban suburban. As far as future land use for sewer and water, they just said it. Urban requires sewer and water, not rural. And that basically, in a nutshell, is what keeps us rural. Okay? We have big acreage. We have a lot of livestock. We have a lot of stuff. Where, could you imagine what it would cost us if we had to eventually hook up to sewer and water? I mean, I have a 10-acre parcel myself with a 600-foot driveway. How much is that going to cost me to run that? And plus, the expense is outrageous. So basically, that's really all I have to say. You originally had approval for an RV park back in 2009. We have no objection to that. Stick to that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Following Mr. Furby will be having trouble reading this one.
Paul Furby.
One moment, please. Janet or Handy? Is there a Handy? Yeah. Thank you.
Daryl Handy.
Daryl, thank you, Daryl. Please. Mr. Furby, the floor is yours.
Morning. Paul Furby, longtime resident of Lee County, decades resident of Alva. I also the vice president of Alva Inc., and I adamantly oppose this change. And Lexus has worked well with our community. We've met with Stan himself. But back in 2009, I'm one of the old bloods that was there as a member of Alva Inc. And back then, as a group of us, we agreed back in 2009 for the 400 units, 400 plus units. We didn't have no problem with that. But in the last couple of years, slowly things have been added on and added on. So that really kind of got to our blood, and it stirred us. It stirred us. Our blood started to boil. So we don't like the change in the neighborhood, and I don't personally like the change. I have seen Alva change a lot in the decades. It's gone from a very rural community to a community that's very changing fast, and we don't like to see the change. This development, if it does get the increase that they're asking for, we're going to see more increased changes in our area that we're not looking forward to. So I'd like to say I am adamantly opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Furby. And then Joseph McGuire, and that's the last card I have. Is there any other person here from the public that would like to speak? All right.
My name's Daryl Handy. I'm not a public speaker, so I was asked this morning to come out and say something. So I want to say I oppose it because of the mitigation part. The Lee County's very own site says the purpose of the mitigation part is to offset the detrimental effects of development. So it worked. Now this is coming in. What's going to offset the effects of this development? So I oppose the development. on the part of the water wells, I worked at Olga Water Plant for a short while, 2 years. They could never meet the needs of this increase in water. They take their water from the river, and they have to shut down when the chlorides are high or when the fungus is flowing down the river. So where are you getting your water? You'll have to dig a lot of wells. I worked at a Collier. They had hundreds of wells. The operator in the control room had to turn this one and to maintain the water levels and the supplies. So no one addressed where's the water coming from. Where you talk about the water table, the wells are going to determine that. So my daughter is a city planner in Atlanta for a big company. I'm going to ask her about this stuff because it's all foreign language to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Darrell.
Mr. McGuire.
Appreciate it. Morning. My name's Joe McGuire. I live in Alva. I actually live directly adjacent to this. So I am probably the most impacted person in the entire room. My home and my farm are on the south end of Calusa 80 at 2991 Bateman Road. Make no mistake, I'm against both of the amendments in front of you today. One I will speak a little bit more about than the other. Water and sewer. Water and sewer, as it's come before this group before, this is a non-contiguous piece. FGUA has a small area there. If you change it over, it will be non-contiguous. That has been a sticking point for you in the past. Essentially, you're creating an island. Please don't do it. Let's talk a little bit about changing this to suburban outlying. Peppered throughout the goals and policies of 27 and 28 on the Lee Plan. The reason the Lee Plan pieces exist is so that when individuals like myself cannot appear in front of you, that they've already committed to writing their intents and their desires. Peppered throughout there is the need to preserve rural character and rural heritage. By turning that piece of property from rural to suburban, you are turning your back on what's written in the Lee County Plan. Clearly, in words alone. Let's talk about just a couple of other things. We talk here about rural character. Strip development. I'll spare that because it's not what's in front of you today. Let's talk about EMS. I know a little bit about EMS, did 25 years of it, 7 years here as a chief. Here's the problem, and Alexis brought up an incongruity, the fact that you have to have a planning session in Olga and no such place exists. This group needs to shut this down, and here's why. I'll go to my last bit. There's a drive time map. That's the closest EMS station. Can't meet there. FEMA flood map. 2004, River Hall wanted to enhance density, and I've got 45 seconds left. In 2018, they came up with an idea, turned around, they were allowed to have their DO. They bought an ambulance. 2013, EMS requested 12-hour funding. 2013, the station finally opens. I doubt we will see that station staffed for 12 hours until the very last part of 2024, which is roughly 6 years. But if you go all the way back to 2004, and this is why this is so important, the processes that come after your approval and the subsequent approvals take so long that the residents wind up essentially in a pitfall for a long, long period of time. Thank you.
Again, no one else from the public in the room. This closes the public portion of this meeting. And now I'll leave it to the LPA for further discussion. Ray, any thoughts?
I can understand trying to go for rezoning. because that happens all the time. But typically, when you go for rezoning, you're looking to increase the usage on the overall project. And this is not the case with this project. You're able to get the density you're looking for by not getting the rezoning that you're looking for. So it's a matter of naming a parcel of land, but getting the same result. I can understand the residents' concerns, but I don't see a problem with what's being presented.
Thank you, Ray.
I was impressed that this has been zoned RV since 2009, and so this comes as no surprise. What is the surprise is the change in the zoning, which, according to my understanding of the site plan, looks better than it would under the existing rural because of the idea of the clustering. So clearly, this plan does more to preserve the water areas and the natural areas. So,
Thank you, Hank. Dustin?
I don't have any comments, Stan.
Don?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much to the public who came and spoke today. We greatly appreciate and support them coming and saying their words. I also find that this is, and I compliment the planning and the applicant for bringing this forward in the manner that they have. I think it's a good proposed use of the land. I think I like the ability of how they have clustered their density. They're not asking for an increase in the density that they could otherwise be entitled to. I also support the extension of the water and sewer. I think that environmentally that is always a good thing versus septic and well that we continue to struggle with, particularly along the river. I do appreciate the public's comments, but unfortunately, Alva is in the crosshairs of continued growth. This is my personal belief. The continued growth coming out from Fort Myers and the growth that's coming out of LaBelle is going to be continued to be a pitch point, particularly down 80. But with that said, when we continue to see good planning efforts that we've saw today, I will support this project.
Thank you, Don. Comments? To reiterate, members of the public, thank you for coming. I review these, and they're lengthy. I particularly pay attention to what the public comments are. I applaud the staff and the applicant for having multiple meetings to try to assuage those concerns, which I think in this case is as good a job as could be done. So for the reasons particularly summarized by Mr. Roberts and as presented by the applicant, I too am finding this to be a very deft piece of planning. And I also am in favor of moving forward with something like that. So then the next step here is we just need a motion.
I'll make a recommendation for an approval or recommendation to the BOCC for CPA 2022-00017, as well as CPA 2022-00018, Calusa 80 text map and amendments as presented.
We have a motion to transmit.
I second that motion.
A second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? None opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other business before the LPA? Janet, you had mentioned a deviation in the July meeting date. Do you want to speak to that?
May 20.
Thank you, Janet. All right. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.